Hello, everyone. I'm Dalton Burdett,
I'm Nick Iricchio.
and we are the Movie Nice.
Well, some of them.
If you're watching this because you want to hear our uncensored,
Unfiltered.
thoughts and opinions about the world of movies and entertainment news, so kick back.
Relax.
And thank you for being part of the conversation. This is a special little interview episode for you guys today.
Yes, a great interview.
Yes. We had the pleasure of speaking with Josh Ruben, director of movies such as Werewolves Within and Scare Me. And he is the star of the movie currently streaming on Shudder right now, A Wounded Fawn. And
Blood Relatives.
Yes. So we were fortunate enough to be able to interview him here on the show, and he was a really lovely person. It was a wonderful interview. We were very honored to have him. It was great. And before we get to the conversation, we just want to remind you guys to please subscribe to the YouTube channel, or if you're listening audio only, please remember to subscribe to us on your audio podcast feeds as well. It's not every day that someone just tweets out, hey, book me for your podcast. You reach out and it actually works. So thank you to Mr. Ruben, and enjoy the interview. So hi, Mr. Ruben. Thank you so much for joining us on the show today. How you doing?
I'm doing well. How are you?
I'm doing amazing, thank you. So we have a lot that we want to bring up to you and talk about, but before we get into that, we're having a little bit debate before the show, and we got to throw it your way. Buy one, rent one, lose one forever. Evil Dead 2, Shaun of the Dead, and Tucker and Dale versus Evil. Go.
Oh, well, it's a should buy one. I'd probably buy Tucker and Dale because it's the only one I haven't seen it. The only one I haven't seen. Rent it. What were the other two? Evil Dead and Shaun of the Dead?
Yes.
I would throw Evil Dead away forever because I've seen it so much and everybody talks about it so often, and I feel bad when I bring it up. So I'm like, I get it. And then, yeah, I'd rent Shaun of the Dead.
Awesome. So one of the first things I wanted to bring up today is obviously the new film on Shudder, A Wounded Fawn, starring yourself. Like Nick mentioned before we recorded, we just wrapped it up this morning. Really intriguing, interesting kind of character study into someone that has more of a obviously darker past, darker actions, and kind of how those consequences to their actions come through, but in a very intense Italian giallo, French new wave way, especially like with the 16 millimeter film, which looked immaculate. And I just was curious, because you obviously do a lot of acting, but you also do a lot of behind the scenes directing, especially Werewolves Within, which I'm a big fan of. And I was just curious, how did this project kind of show up on the map for you, and when did you kind of first get involved?
It was a year ago and change. It was last September of 2021, I think. Travis Stevens, the director, co-writer, actually sent me a DM on Twitter, and he was like, would you be interested in reading the script? And I knew that he was a really well-respected producer. I hadn't seen his previous films at the time, but I was intrigued. I knew it was going to be not your straightforward horror fare, which was just as intriguing. I really wanted to, I love playing an experimental space. I opened up the script and just thought it was totally genius. I mean, talking about Evil Dead and just seeing all the comparisons too with, this kind of wave of fandom that's coming in as people are absorbing it and watching it and sharing it. So many comparisons to Evil Dead and The Shining and early giallo. It's been really exciting. So yeah, I just cracked the script open and was just like, wow, this is really rad.
Awesome. And along with obviously not only the film, the stars in the film, but the visual style that he brought to this film, especially with the experimental bits, whenever your character will say is hurting in the brain, the experimental bits in the editing, it really kind of not only maintains a tone, but it also drives forward the kind of overall messaging and emotion of that lead character. And were these, obviously, you read the script, you want to join the project, but in your first meetings with this director, was it brought up like how experimental it was going to be? Was it kind of discussed the direction in which it was going, or was that kind of something that was developed along the process?
Travis, a lot of the imagery in the of the film was really actually articulated well in the script. So I was able to kind of read it and sort of see the film. You just kind of knew it was going to have this in-camera practical effect kind of a thing. So that was what I was super like especially excited about was that, would be doing a film that, was going to be kind of an homage to those early, 70s films where you could really see the filmmaking, and where, there was going to be little to zero reliance on VFX. And again, it was just, I had no sense of really how kind of experimental it was going to be. I knew I had quite a sense of it, like 70%, but when I saw the film at Tribeca, like at the premiere, I was just blown away just by how immersive it is. I mean, the 16 millimeter alone just takes it such a long way, but the combination of that involves score, and the wardrobe, just seeing how that like lights up the screen was just like so visceral and so impressive, and just made me all the more proud to be a part of it.
Yeah, no, that was definitely such a cool like aspect to it, and also just all of the costuming with that as well. All the, I guess, I don't want to call them creatures, but just kind of the big elaborate outfits that they were wearing. I'm sure just from an acting standpoint, being on set and just being approached by such a thing just already puts you in the headspace of, oh my God. And then, not to go into spoilers, but some of the practical effects, or I'm assuming what appeared to be practical at the end there when, let's say you get a pretty good headache.
Yeah, man, that was a,
you know,
without giving any spoilers or spoiling anything. I mean, Ashley Thomas, one of our makeup artists, she basically, she did a full head cast, which I've been used to in, previous work I've done. Even at College Humor, I used to get full casts of my head done, and that's the only way to make it. I mean, there was a full bust of my head, so it was wild to just see how that was utilized, so effective in the film. I mean, you see the thing in person, it's like, oh, it's a pretty realistic bust of Josh's head, but you have to shoot it right, and they really nailed it. It was just so wild.
Yeah, no, it looked incredible. So then my next question is, do you have the head?
I don't excuse me, I don't have the head. I think my guess is that Ashley was the lucky winner, so that she could add it to her collection. But it's just insane how accurate the thing was. I mean, it had like teeth and just more like the hair punching, like it so accurately got the shape of my head so well. And there was this incredible sculptor named Dan Martin who did the prosthetic for the eyepiece, and he works on a lot of like Brandon Cronenberg stuff. Like I think he did Possessor, just as like one of his many films. Yeah, and so when I put that thing on, I was like, oh no, this was definitely made by a craftsman, because it looks so real, and was so it was pretty instrumental in like quote unquote getting me there as an actor. You feel woozy putting the thing on because your eyesight is kind of out. So we had such a, and that was just one department. I mean, every department was just like killing it, when they were doing their sort of solos, so to speak. And yeah, makeup team just destroyed it. It was kind of incredible.
I was say, what is when you're getting that head mold done, what's that kind of process? Like, how long does that take about? Because I know that, what is it, like nose breathing, and you got to remain like perfectly still. I'm sure that given your character's kind of psychological disturbances, being encased in the mold for so long probably helped a lot.
It'd probably be terrible for Bruce if he had to do it, just to like face the red owl for an hour and change.
Yeah.
For me, it's kind of meditative. This one was probably the most intense experience I've had, because I've never had a full like a cowl mask. So what it is it's this essentially this plaster. They Vaseline up your face and your hair. They put on sort of a shower cap or a bald cap prosthetic on your head, so that your hair doesn't peek through, or worse, get torn off when this adhesive is sort of gooped all over your body. So you have to go shirtless, get all kind of like gooped up on your head, so that your head is sort of like, there's nothing for this stuff to stick to, just like mold to your skin. And then this heavy cold plaster and goop is applied to your face and head and shoulders. And because they had to get an accurate cast, the goop gets heavier and heavier and heavier. So it feels like this, you're sitting in a chair, but it's this extremely heavy weight, at least 8 pounds piled on top of your head and your shoulder.
Oh, wow.
Which doesn't sound like a lot, but it's a heavy compression. And that's why this one in particular was so intense. Yeah, you're sitting in the dark for north of 45 minutes, just breathing through your nose. No straws or anything like that. So there's a lot of people who like can't deal with that type of claustrophobia, but I think it's pretty meditative. This one I had to, you're right, it was like sitting up straight, and it was a lot more intensive. So it was definitely more, it was like more painful, and certainly painful to get off, but the result was insane.
Yeah, all that hard work's kind of worth it when you see that end product.
Oh yeah, I mean, when you see the end product, it's like, oh no way, that is insane. I mean, it looked like just the head was sitting there on the couch. We put sunglasses on it and shit. It was pretty fun.
That's cool. Yeah, fun little on-set prop.
In, speaking about, the most recent project in A Wounded Fawn, I kind of want to take you all the way back to the beginning. You mentioned your early college humor days, even going before that. What was it about, film, television, that whole medium that inspired you to kind of want to be both in front of and behind the camera? And would you consider yourself more of a director that became an actor, or an actor that became a director?
Oh my God, amazing, amazing questions. I guess to answer your first question, films were immersive, and I'm a child of the 80s. And so, there was something so like church-like about, certainly for me as a little kid, like 5, 6 years old, going to the video store and seeing not just the horror artwork on VHSs, but the cardboard cutouts of everything from like the transference device in Cronenberg's The Fly, to cardboard cutouts of Freddy Krueger, to also like cardboard cutouts of like Fievel in America, in An American Tale. And so it felt like this larger than life kind of magical vault. And so I think that was attractive. And then of course you're sitting on the floor, like on the rug, staring up at the big like Zenith TV and watching, cartoons, or in my house it'd be like a cartoon movie. And then my older sister would often sneak me or show me like Stephen King's Cat's Eye or whatever, or a Freddy Krueger movie I was way too young to watch, but loved anyway. And I don't know, it was just something, so it was escapist. And I think I was a shy kid, a moody kid, and I'd have, nightmares and temper tantrums. And I was like a loner. I was just like a, wild kind of weirdo of a kid. And movies provided such an escape for me, I think from an early age, without realizing that that's what I needed or what I craved or what I wanted. I just wanted to kind of live in it. I became very fascinated early on about like blood, for example. I remember my mom and dad like explaining that in Jaws, which for some reason I watched 150 times before 10 years old, understanding more and more of it the older I got, the references and whatnot, relationships, that hey, that blood is ketchup, Josh. That was like the easiest way they can explain it, just so that they made sure I wasn't totally traumatized. So I wanted to be a part of it just in any way that I could, or immerse myself. I just knew that I was drawn in by everything that I was seeing. There was something magical about popping this tape into the VHS and being kind of transported. I think I originally wanted to act. I mean, I started this whole my whole career was just like, I knew I wanted to perform, and started doing theater. When I moved to New York, I realized no one was gonna like hand me the keys to Hollywood or anything without kind of paving my own way. And so I very early on started making my own videos with my buddy Sam, who now owns College Humor / Dropout, Sam Reich. So we started making videos and formed a sketch group, and that's how I started to direct. So I was an actor first that came into directing, and then suddenly realized how kind of self-actualizing and I guess immense of an experience directing is. It's like it's more I'd say not cathartic than acting, but there's just something kind of more powerful. The drug like hits me on a more intense way. It's like the ultimate kind of form of creativity, as hyper stressful as it is. And that's not to say at all that I'm putting acting away by any means. I love to act because I can kind of archive other directors' processes and make myself become archive that to become a better director when I then I step behind the camera.
Awesome. And I think the beneficial thing about both being a director and being an actor is each experience can help complement and improve upon the other. And that as a director, you can probably, through directing, see performances, see how to communicate with actors, and have that improve your performances on screen. So when you're on screen, and you know how, directors like to communicate, and you know how the whole process works, it allows for not only more collaboration but also more flexibility to style, because every director is different. So do you find that that's true with you, that being both in front of and behind the camera improves and embraces creativity on both sides?
Oh my gosh, absolutely. Because the like the really good actors, they know they have a similar sort of skill set, I'd say, to directors and even other crew members. We all know the real pros or know most and are aware of their instrument, be it the camera or their face, their body. If you know what your limitations are visually, say if I know if I move a foot to the left, it's gonna, fuck up your image, or just an inch to the right, it's gonna be better light on my face, or I'm gonna look more ominous if I look down but look up with my brow or whatever it is. The more control you have of your instrument, the more awareness you have of the limitations of the image, the better and the more creative you can be. And that's what's so exciting. It's why I think I like Spielberg's kind of or I was so I guess turned on from an early age by his compositions, because actors were the image was always very live, very kind of fantastical, but it was my first experience looking at tableaus where actors were allowed to kind of come in and out of frame, and your eye was allowed to kind of do its own kind of editing. Mike Nichols was, I think, even better than that as a director. You look at films like Virginia Woolf and even whatever, The Graduate and The Birdcage, was a little bit of experimentalism there, but the actors were kind of doing the work, and yet the camera was it was just kind of elevating the image ever so slightly, but it was so kind of performance based. And I don't know, and within that there was so much kind of freedom, I think, and there's an electricity about that. So yeah, I think the more you know about your kind of limitations, the more control you have over your instrument, the more creative you could be, for sure. And that's why I think a lot of great directors say this is true. It's like, great directing is great casting. If you can guide and mold someone who's going to do 90.9% of the work for you and take them the rest of the way, certainly visually aiding them, you're gonna have a hit every time.
Yeah, and something I find, you mentioned films like The Graduate, is you mentioned how the composition and the shots not only are lively, but the performances help bring those shots out. And something that I found with a lot of directing is it's not necessarily about what you do with the camera and what the actor does, it's about the relationship between those two things and how that can push the story forward with that relationship. It's almost a relationship that doesn't get talked about enough. And with A Wounded Fawn in particular, I think that relationship was utilized extremely well, especially towards the beginning of the film, when the audience is sort of unsure of your character. I see a lot of the relationship between the composition, between the camera, and between yourself and your co-stars. And I think that's why it sets the tone right at the beginning, right away, the kind of ride that the audience is going to go on.
I completely agree. One of my favorite experiences of Wounded Fawn, especially seeing it the first time, was how Travis held on Malin Barr, his first victim's face, in close up, and how Bruce kind of falls into soft focus in the background, in the far background, and he's just kind of making conversation with her, and you just suddenly feel unsettled. Whereas you first seeing him in all these kind of intense, crisp close-ups, there's something about him kind of meandering the background softly, where or in soft focus visually, where you immediately feel unsettled. And I'm fascinated by how visuals can affect you emotionally, and as a filmmaker you have to be able to communicate your feelings to your cinematographer, and any great cinematographer will be able to translate that visually. But you will typically you will imagine those keystone images before you go into a shoot, and you can often see them. If you're a movie lover and a movie watcher, you'll be able to translate from your imagination seeing this film how certain images are going to affect you emotionally and improve the narrative. That is the most kind of like liminal, ephemeral. I don't know if ephemeral is the right word, but there is just kind of it's kind of intangible talent, and that a filmmaker just kind of has to have and learn. I think a big piece of it comes from being I wouldn't even say cinephile. It's just like a movie watcher. If you love and you're obsessed with movies and storytelling, you can just kind of feel that stuff in your bones. And that's what makes me just so fascinated, just talking, especially with other directors and cinematographers, just kind of seeing processes. It's such an abstract kind of idea, but it's what makes a movie great. People like, hate to use Spielberg, and especially people like Nichols and Robert Altman, they were complete masters at recognizing how, the image affects you emotionally.
Yeah, no, definitely very well said there. Especially with like we make some short films ourselves here, and just that relationship watching on set to try to portray that is always such an interesting dynamic to see. I also want to talk about you're also promoting your other movie, Blood Relatives. I wanted to kind of go into, because you were a producer on that film, correct?
That's correct, yeah.
Kind of just the origin of how you got involved with that project and what that experience was like working with Noah Segan, correct? Is that the pronunciation? Yeah.
He was one of the test audience members for a Werewolves Within screening.
Oh, really?
And it was, during COVID. And so the test screenings where I was able to watch on Zoom without any of the attendees knowing that I was watching the Q&A portion. So they'd get a link and then they'd all kind of assemble on Zoom, and I could basically spy on them, watch the feedback and take notes and stuff. And Noah was one of them. And I was like, holy shit, that's Rian Johnson's guy. That dude was super scary in Looper. Like, he was great in Brick. Like, I know, he's fucking awesome in Knives Out.
Oh, I loved him as the little the cop's assistant, right? Or one of the detectives. Yeah, so good. Trooper.
Kind of a scene stealer, and I think he's a fascinating actor. After the Werewolf screening, I just got in touch with them directly, and I was like, hey, I was spying on the screening, and I noticed that you were here. Can I give you a call and just kind of pick your brain about working with Rian Johnson and all these kind of bigger actors, and what your experience has been, just being like, a dude who's been in whatever 100 movies or whatever. And we really hit it off. We had a couple phone calls. We talked for, an hour here, an hour there, and just kind of shooting the shit. And he eventually told me, he's like, I watched, I can't remember if he had already seen Scare Me, my first film, but he had watched it and was sort of going like, I can't believe what you did. And you produced it and you wrote it and you were in it and you were directing, and how did you self-direct and this, that, and the other thing. And I was just kind of going through the process, explaining, how that came to be. And he said, well, I have a script that's pretty dialogue driven and fairly contained. And, if I wanted to do the Scare Me thing for myself, or the Thunder Road thing for myself, and Jim Cummings was someone I talked to before I went and did Scare Me, would you be interested in producing? And I was like, yeah, sure. I would love to produce for other filmmakers. I'm not a paperwork producer by any means, but I'm a connector, and I'll help you, kind of co-direct if the day calls for it. And we were kind of off and running. It was crazy. Like, he's tight with Sam Zimmerman over at Shudder. We were able to get them the script and a budget pretty quickly. And it's a small movie. I mean, our budget was well south of $1 million. But we got the money and shot the film and got it in festivals within a year. It's pretty wild. So my experience of that was, for the first time in my career, like being the producer with the coffee, like behind the monitor, sort of calling out, things to look out for, or things for Noah to look out for if he was trying to be a good partner for Victoria, and all that kind of good stuff. And it was a pretty awesome experience. I loved doing that, because especially on the where I can be super helpful for someone directing, or even for the DP, like, hey, what if you lowered the camera a little bit? This is how you'd affect the scene emotionally, right? Everyone agree, this, that, and the other thing. It was pretty rad.
Now, you said kind of that you play more of the connector type of producer. I did a little IMDb snooping, obviously, as research, and I noticed a little overlap with TV show Plan B. Was that part of the connecting there with Victoria Morales?
That's absolutely correct. So Plan B was actually, it was a movie.
Oh, movie, sorry.
It's all good. It's a movie directed by Natalie Morales, who's a good friend of mine, and I played a similar character in Plan B that I did in cameoed as in Blood Relatives, just kind of, as Vic was saying, like creeping on her. It's like, why are you playing these characters that keep continually creep on me? But we did this scene together, you know, it was like during COVID, and I drove up. I was staying at my parents' house at the time for the holidays, got this quick gig, went up there for 2 days, and shot with Vic, and I just thought she was so good. I mean, both of the girls were incredible. Um Kuhu was the other actress, but there was something about Vic that was just so rad. It felt right when we were talking about casting. No, it was like, you know, who could play my daughter, and I threw a few names around, people that I know that might be appropriate, but we really wanted to go diverse, especially because we don't know who Francis's mother is, or wife rather, Jane's mom is, and suggested Vic, and he and Vic got on the phone and hit it off, started chatting character, and Vic just was asking all the right questions and enthusiastic in all the best ways, and that was magic casting that just kind of came, you know, super quickly. And then just in Noah's, you know, just like with Travis Stevens, like Noah's been around the industry for so long, he's met so many actors, he already was able to rope in like Tracy Thoms from Looper, and of course Rent and the 150,000 other, you know, shows and movies and stuff, as well as John Proudstar from Reservation Dogs and Doug Benson. I mean, it became this really, really rad cast very quickly because of, you know, he's the same kind of a person, a connector, just kind of by nature of being a creative person, and just kind of playing the festivals and meeting people and vibing. That's how you inadvertently kind of become a producer. So much of it is like, who can you text to come do your thing, you know? So even if you're doing a short film, it's the same shit. Hey, you want to come out and do this thing? Great, you're a producer. You know, the producer just makes it happen.
Yeah, and I briefly wanted to talk about Werewolves Within, because, you know, that film, I had heard about it just from a bunch of friends having watched it, and they were just like, dude, it's super fun, it's scary, it's you know, it's everything, you got to check it out. And I was like, okay. When I got around to it, you know, what you were able to achieve in terms of balancing tone and in terms of keeping the intrigue, like, and keeping the story intriguing from beginning to end, with characters that were all separate from one another, but also had this kind of similar vibe in this town. It was such a well done, lovely film, and to have a film like that come out during a pandemic and end up being beloved by so many people. What was that experience like for you? Because I'm sure it was nerves, you know, during that really uncertain time, especially in film. You know, what was that experience like for you?
Well, that experience was incredible because I was working with like Ubisoft, this big video game company. We get acquired in advance of I think our debut at Tribeca by IFC. So we have all the support, and you know, for Ubisoft, it's a drop in the bucket to, you know, get press going and get a buzz going. This all the, you know, marketing, all the stuff that costs money. We had the same trailer company that did like the trailer for Ready or Not, and the same like poster people that did the posters for Knives Out. I mean, it was so rad just to see all the support. And also, it was, you know, Biden was talking about how by July 4th, we were like COVID was going to be over and everybody was vaccinated, and probably the summer, you know, we've all been waiting for, like, we're going to debut at Tribeca and it's going to be outside. And, you know, it felt great. It felt sort of euphoric because my first film, you know, I have to remember, I went to Sundance with Scare Me January of 2020 with an October 2020 drop on Shudder, and there was a brief plan to do a 2-week like Alamo release, you know, in theaters, and we wrapped Werewolves March of 2020, and you know, I first released Scare Me, you know, that following October, and it's a fart in the wind. You know, so few people have seen it because it went to Shudder, went on VOD, and everyone was terrified to go to the theater. So we took the first deal we got, and, you know, people were home and certainly watching stuff, and it was a cozy kind of almost COVID-esque movie, contained movie, and that felt sort of appropriate. But I was nervous because with Werewolves, we were all stoked to kind of get it out into the world, but we held on to it. They very smartly waited to get it out for a June release, and so that experience was pretty incredible. I got to go to the IFC theater in New York City and see people react and do some Q&As and all that stuff, and it felt incredible. But, you know, I admit, I mean, I think if it came out today, and if people were, you know, as down to go to theaters today or then, as they are today, like down to go see Barbarian and Bodies and Nope. My guess is we probably wouldn't have, shattered box office records, but I think we would have done pretty well. And I do strongly believe, just kind of keeping my eye on, I look at like Letterboxd and Twitter and just kind of see when people might be posting about it or watching it. I think that in like a decade's time, the way that Clue kind of became so fun and watchable, and maybe even Monster Squad, I think it'll have its own kind of following, and it's gonna take time. But I'm super proud of it, how it was rolled out, how it was received. Both movies were critically, received pretty well. But I'm definitely due to like try and get a movie in the theater, which I know is super tough, but something splashy and funny and scary that I can take a similar kind of swing that Parker Finn did, or Helena Rain or something. I think that'd be really really rad to just kind of get one of my pieces out to a wider public, because Shudder's wonderful, but it's still very niche platform.
Yeah, no, I absolutely. Like, I just I'm a bad horror nerd and just downloaded it about 2 weeks ago when we got this interview, just to start catching up on some of the stuff that I may have missed. But with Werewolves Within, I actually did watch that close to release day when it came out, mid-pandemic there. But it does have some legs, though. Congratulations on was it South Korea that it just released in?
Yeah, very good. Yeah, man. Someone wrote me from wildly from Busan, a comic book artist, screening here, and people were laughing and they were jumping at the right moment and scared. So typically, for it to like still be kind of rolling out in theaters is really phenomenal. But I think that that will surely be the last one before it's forever VOD and hard media. It's pretty cool to get a box of those Blu-rays too, to be able to send to people and sign all that stuff. That was fun.
Oh, that's really cool. I had a question about Scare Me as well. Because I thought the anthology kind of platform was such a cool way to tell the story, especially with like the sound design and everything of it. My question was more of, was the idea to have that from the start, or was it more of a bunch of different horror movie ideas that you decided to try to make into one sort of anthological thing?
I always knew I wanted to make basically an anthology movie that never left the campfire, so to speak, simply by nature of the device, and because we didn't have the money to go anywhere else other than the living room of this cabin. So I cheated with these vignettes by compiling the basically act 2 of the film, stuffing act 2 with every unfinished script idea that I'd ever had. So Venus was a script I started writing and hit a wall at page 33. The werewolf idea was an idea I've had in the back of my head and kind of barely fleshed out. I shoved that in there. The troll thing, I was like, I'll just make a bunch of random shit up, but surround it by making it a showcase for how I can just do this weird like squat thing. And that just kind of created it just created the segments of the film, with the overarching energy of it, or the engine of it, being this gender dynamic between these two characters who are sort of flawed in their own ways. I don't know if that answers your question, but that was kind of how it came to be.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And with the performances, obviously, like great performance from yourself. Is it Aya or Aya? I always don't know how to pronounce it. Aya Cash and Chris Redd from SNL. Was that a very highly improvisational set, or was with the script, with what you wrote, with everything, was that kind of pretty clear cut, or was there a lot of room for that sort of play dynamic just to play off each other with the comedic performances?
You always want room to play, and there was definitely there was room to play, but we didn't have a lot of time to play because we shot the thing in like 12 and a half, 13 days, something like that. So every word was scripted, with the exception of a few ums and uhs, and anytime Aya or Chris wanted to take liberty with dialogue, they certainly did and could. But that's a scripted movie. It's essentially a play. And I want to adapt to stage someday. And so, I think it's a big compliment when people say, shit, this feels like an improv movie, whether they were, kind of hating on it or loving on it, because it's so kind of natural in that way and a testament to the performances.
Yeah, no, that's awesome to hear. And earlier we were talking about people's inkling to kind of go back to the movie theaters for horror, or just kind of go back to the movie theaters in general. And something that I ask everyone that we interview on the show, because we're huge proponents of the theatrical movie going experience, and just because it means so much in the moment, and like I can tell you like exact places, theaters where I was when I saw a movie that really impacted me. So I just wanted to throw the question to you: do you have any, off the top of your head, favorite memorable movie going experiences that you'll kind of cherish with you forever?
Oh, that's such a great question. I mean, so many, so many. I can tell you, um, there was a movie theater by my house where I grew up in Potomac, Maryland. I think it was a Cineplex Odeon theater compound that not only was, it didn't only have the theater, but there was like a pond where people could like rent paddle boats. Inside was the small like structure with video games that definitely included the first I want to say it was Aliens. It was like an arcade game where you could like shoot them with machine guns.
That's
And I
awesome.
was like, for whatever reason, like crazy about guns when I was a little kid. I had all these toy guns. Very different era, like watching RoboCop and playing with RoboCop toy. I don't know, I was obsessed with
Mhm.
RoboCop and guns and cops and robbers. So we go to this theater to I remember one time uh we tried to get into Home Alone and it was sold out. And I think instead we ended up seeing like Aladdin. Like that was like one of those great days. You just think, oh yeah, really wanted to see this one, but let's just go into this other one, and being just blown away by that. But I think it was more than the films themselves. It was this place that was like this kind of playground that had these incredibly seminal films. And to my formative years, I'd say one of the most memorable ones would be going to see Terminator 2 with my dad there. If it wasn't the one in Hudson Valley Mall, I can't quite remember, but that was a really really good one. It was like we've gone to so few movies together, maybe that and like City Slickers or something. But those two are probably the most memorable. But there was just something about the place itself, that combo of like being like a playground for kids, but also just like the church of the theatrical experience. That was really special.
Yeah, yeah, no, kind of going to the movies with the dad, like that lone trip, is also just very. I don't know. It's like a formative memory. Like you mentioned Terminator 2. I vividly remember going to see X2 with my dad, and we saw it on a one screen theater in this small town in Indiana. And it was the first time that an audience, well, for me, because I was really young at the time, it was the first time an audience during a movie like cheered during the movie. And it was when like Wolverine stabbed that dude through the fridge, and like the whole theater went nuts. And I remember just being a kid being like, I didn't even know you were allowed to do that during a movie. Like just that whole collective feeling. And it's just such a formative thing. And you remember that when you go forward in your art and the things that you do. You want to give the audience that feeling, which leads me into the final question here. I know we're running close on time. If you were to sit down with somebody who's never seen A Wounded Fawn, if you're showing someone who's never seen that performance before, what is the one thing you hope that person would take away from your performance?
Oh man, that's awesome. I mean, I don't know if this necessarily answers the question, but I would like them to, if they did know me or were something of a fan, and I think I'm seeing this a little bit, especially with the fans of mine do comedy. I would love for them to kind of walk away going like, "Holy shit, you can't pin this guy down." Um, like just simply thinking that was unexpected and that was good. It was like that was unexpected and it was like that was good stuff. I really really admire actors that you don't quite know what they're going to do next. And I can confidently say about myself, just finding growing into or out of certain insecurities, being able to boast. I love that people don't quite know, of the next things I have kind of brewing, whether as a filmmaker or as an actor. And I don't really know what the next thing as an actor will be, but I know that it will be a surprise for people who will go, "Oh shit, Like I love to be able to, put stuff out and go like, wait, not only does he do like, this impressions game show with the old College Humor homies, he also directs horror comedies with people like Sam Richardson and Milana Weintraub and Harvey Guillen. But he also played a serial killer and scared the shit out of me. Like I love that it's kind of in different genres that you don't quite know. I'm playing the psych out game, like you don't know which exit I'm going to run for, or building I'm going to run into. Like that's exciting to me. And so I hope that's what people take away is, a bit of like, not like what can't he do, but wow, I had no idea that was in him. And with the next thing, certainly with the next movie, I hope I can deliver on that level too, to continue to kind of go, and then he did this. It's why Soderbergh is so cool. It's like I'm not even that big of a Soderbergh cinephile, but it's like, wait, he did Contagion, and he also did Magic Mike, and he did Ocean's 11, and he did these like little iPhone movies. What?
Yeah, and whatever is next for you, we can't wait to see it. And is there anything about any future projects you could tease for us?
I can tell you that there's two I'm really excited about that I think I can tease. The first one is there's a sci-fi film that I think I can kind of imbue a bit of Carpenter-esque gore, or I should say Rob Bottin-esque gore too. That's really, really exciting, kind of in a Coen Brothers sort of world, which is great. So continuing that kind of Coen's sensibility that I love so much, reverent sensibility, but really do some scary shit with some practical kind of alien stuff. And that one's pretty rad. There's some actors attached to it. I can tease that one actor attached to it is in the Marvel universe, which is really, really rad. But it's tough out there to get financing, so that's one I'm stoked on. And then the other one is I'm working on something with Michael Kennedy, who wrote Freaky.
Yeah.
My favorite Blumhouse horror comedies to come out in some time. Maybe their only horror comedy. So yeah, I'm thrilled about that one as well. Those should be super fun, and I think they will appeal to different spectrums of the horror audience, or at least I hope they will.
That's amazing here. As long as you keep making them, we'll keep watching them. Thank you so much for the opportunity to interview you. We really, really appreciate it. It's been amazing. Thank you very much.
Such killer questions, by the way. So appreciated. It's refreshing. Thank you.
Oh, that's high praise. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you for taking it, and congratulations on all of the success, and predominantly the two releases, Wounded Fawn and Blood Relatives, now streaming on Shudder.
Thank you.
Yeah, of course. Thanks again.
Thank you guys so much for watching the interview today. That's all we had for you. You got anything else for him, Nick?
Just remember to stream Blood Relatives and A Wounded Fawn on Shudder.
Absolutely.
Yes.
Thank you guys very much, and we'll see you next week.